Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video here today. I am back from Abu Dhabi, that epic season finale. I'm looking about 100 times less tired than I did in that small little at-the-track video I posted on Sunday. The dust is still settling after that finale, but today we're not talking about just the finale. We're talking about the whole season as we're doing a F1 2021 races tier list based on how entertaining I thought the races were. I think I am, by the way, eventually going to do a video on kind of my opinion and my take on what went down in Abu Dhabi. I want to first post my vlog, actually, from the whole trip out there with my team quadrant, and then I'll go about making that video maybe the next coming day, so look out for that. But right now, we're going to dig into this. As I do them, I'm actually going to go back and watch the YouTube highlights of the race, just to make sure I try and negate recency bias, because I think sometimes, especially with a long F1 season like this, you can kind of think that the more recent races that were really great are better than some of the really great races we had earlier in the season, just because you can't remember them as well. It's going to make sure I try and, jog my memory basically at what happened in those early races, because there were some really, really great ones at the start of the year, of course, as we did at the end of the year. Right, we're going to start off obviously with round number 1, the Bahrain Grand Prix. Very, very good race. Entertaining. We had, the first inkling that we would have Verstappen v Hamilton for hopefully the rest of the year. The Red Bull was looking so much stronger. Merc, few little foibles in pre-season testing, and we got a decent first battle with Max. Maybe also the first inkling of track limits being a sort of question mark, and the way people defend and whatnot. But it was a good race, and it wasn't just them as well. I remember, and even looking back at the highlights as well, some good fighting in the midfield. We had the Alpine Ferrari battle. Alonso back in F1. It was great to see him fighting Yuki. Actually, at the first race, we know how Yuki's season went a little bit iffy in the middle there, but Yuki started off, with a really electric start at Bahrain. So even the midfield battles were really a great watch. So Bahrain, for me, a solid, great watch this season. It was a cracking, great opener for the year and set ourselves up for, I think, that was a good example of that sets us up for how the year went on, generally speaking. Then we come to Imola for the second round of the season. Another really, really great race, but I am actually going to lean towards calling it biblical because of, just how crazy it was. There was, it was a wet race as well, which made things, it just makes things so much more spicy, even more so when you actually have drivers fighting each other properly in the wet, not just kind of, just all trying to survive the wet track. They're actually able to race wheel to wheel. We saw Verstappen and Hamilton again battling right off the get-go. Verstappen squeezed Hamilton off onto the little bollard bits. We then obviously some, in qualifying, Lando narrowly missed out on what could have maybe been a pole position at Imola instead, and he ended up getting a podium. Obviously, I'm going to be a bit biased of, liking races that Lando did well in, because I know the guy, but even with that, you've got to admit that is a stonking podium. We also had, what was it, pre-race, the Ferrari span. Of course, then remember, we had the huge crash with Russell and Bottas. I actually, for a second, forgot that happened. That was a spicy moment, because at the time, it was obviously, we were all thinking maybe when's Russell going to go to Merc. Later in the season, we find out it's going to happen. So that was actually a really juicy thing of the two drivers who are going to, effectively, the old guy being booted out, Bottas, crashing with the guy coming in later next year. That's spicy enough. Hamilton as well, remember, went off and had to reverse on the gravel. So I think there's so much craziness going on at Imola that has got to be a biblical race. Round 3, the Portuguese Grand Prix. Now, I remember this race not being that great. It was really meh to me in my memory. I've just watched back the highlights. There were a few little fights here and there, but to be honest, a lot of the race, there wasn't much happening, and in the end, it was kind of inevitable. You could see the result happening of Lewis winning it, Verstappen second, even when, Verstappen had to overtake Bottas on the inside of the hairpin, even though, yes, exciting, it was also probably inevitable that Verstappen was always going to overtake Bottas. They tried, I think, something different with Perez, I think, keeping him out longer. He's P4, and, there was a few midfield battles here and there, the Alonso and the Alpines fighting a little bit here and there, but for me, it's going to be in the meh category. I think there's maybe going to be Portuguese fans that maybe want me to put that higher. Simply put, last year's Portuguese Grand Prix was 10 times better. It was so good. This year's one, I think, was let down by the tyre selection. I think we should be bringing softer tyres to Portugal because the one stop was just very... Round 4, the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, this one was actually quite... it was pretty decent because of that front fight. Wasn't too much happening behind, I recall, really. It was a lot of the focus that entire race was on the leaders. You know, obviously there's always focus on the leaders for a lot of the races, but, you know, a lot of the time, you know, when there is a mad thing happening in the midfield, there is focus on that as well, and F1 have been getting better at that as of late with the TV direction, but there was a lot of focus just on Max and Lewis on this one because of the interesting thing that was happening of Merc going for the aggression, going on the you know, fresher tyre to come back through, have the pace to punch past Verstappen and get back into the race lead and the eventual win for Hamilton. Juicy start with Verstappen overtaking him and then actually having to just wait, and that tension, waiting, and then eventually seeing Hamilton catch Verstappen and overtake him, I think made it a decent race. It wasn't a cracking great watch, you know, because there were just periods of the race where you had to kind of a slow burner, if you will. It was one of those races, like I said at the beginning, that as an F1 fan who watches all the races or tries to watch all the races, you can appreciate that there's sometimes going to be a slow burner where you have to wait for the strategic element to come in. A casual fan may find it a bit more boring, basically. So that's I feel a bog standard decent F1 race. The Monaco Grand Prix. Now, there was a very nice different podium. We had Max winning the race. We had Sainz and Lando on the podium. Now, there's no question that is a sick podium. It was awesome to see the Car-Lando, you know, partnership back on the podium together. It was a sick result. It was also, you know, crazy to see Mercedes make a bit of a blunder. I think, was it, you know, pitting Merkel a bit earlier. Verstappen and Red Bull decided to give track position, and Monaco, the clean air was you know, it mattered so much this season that, you know, Hamilton couldn't even get past Gasly for so many laps, I think in the end, did he even get past Gasly? I don't think so. If I watch back at the highlights, no, Hamilton was stuck behind Gasly the whole time, so he was unable to overtake an AlphaTauri. So that's how difficult it was to overtake Monaco, especially this year, especially with the tyre. I think the tyre performance, you know, went off very quickly, didn't it, with the hard compound as well. Like, it was initially a little bit quick, but you needed clean air to keep it going. So in terms of the race, I remember I did back seat, I think, with Niran again. And it was just a bit of a, it was a bit of a mare race. It was classic Monaco. Monaco is never, if I was just basing off the results and what I like to see in the results, it was obviously a great watch to see, you know, Sainz and Lando get on the podium. And, you know, it was cool to have Verstappen win that and come back a little bit more on Hamilton, because at that point in the season, so early on, you want things to be as close as they can. Little did we know it was going to go all the way down to the wire. But in terms of the actual race itself, my entertainment value, it's in meh. Monaco's always been... Look, Monaco for me, it's all about Saturday. You give me Saturday, Monaco being biblical every time, because it's lovely to see the cars go around Monaco on a Saturday. The race, though, you already know it's kind of been done and said by Saturday. Azerbaijan, Baku. Now, this was a real great watch. Whether it's biblical, I don't think so, because there were parts of that race that were a bit of a slow burner. I remember distinctly there were large portions where you were kind of like, it's going to heat up, don't worry. And then what made it heat up was actually the fact that Verstappen had that tyre failure, Stroll had the tyre failure, and the restart under red flags. That's what made it extra juicy, because off the red flag, Hamilton, cold brakes, I think it was, went straight off. Perez winning the race. Great watch in the end of a Grand Prix. Also, the fact that both Hamilton and Verstappen had issues that race meant that it kind of equalised in terms of balancing, and karma paid out in terms of, you know, it didn't get massively skewed one way in the championship. So it was also great in that kind of regard. There were some, you know, a few little, you know, moments of racing, I would say, around Azerbaijan from memory. But for a large part of that, it was a slow burner until that very exciting red flag portion. But then it was a great watch, and obviously an amazing podium. Perez, Vettel, Gasly. That's a good field podium as well. And of course, at the same time, I actually forgot. I just went back to kind of double check and just see if there's anything I missed. I forgot Leclerc was on pole. Ferrari actually looked amazing at Monaco and then Baku for some random reason. So that was spicy at the start as well, because Hamilton had to go and overtake the Ferrari. Then he had Red Bull actually jumping the Mercedes in the pit stop kind of strategy. So yeah, it was all overall a very good watch. France. Now, this was surprisingly a very decent Grand Prix for France. I think it's going to go in decent. Great watch. Maybe even a great watch. France usually is not. You know, Paul Ricard, don't think it lends itself to good racing. But like I said, Red Bull counteracted what they saw at Spain with, you know, not going aggressive enough. So Red Bull went uber aggressive. You know, you had Perez saying on the radio, let's go get him, when he let Verstappen by. And then, well, he went and gone get them. You know, Verstappen overtook Hamilton. Perez was ahead of Bottas. And so it was a Red Bull 1-3 there. And Red Bull did to Mercedes what Merc did to them in Spain. So I think it was a decent watch. I don't think it's in the same category as Bahrain and Azerbaijan. So that for me would be a decent watch. Right, the Austrian Grand Prix, the first one. I actually forgot for a second. We had two of them because I think COVID knocked out one of the races. It's this one right here. I'm trying to suss out which one is which. So we got this one here, the end of June one, Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas. Lando was actually really high up on the grid, and actually I remember fighting Perez. I think that was the race, was it not, where they had that penalty for him because of the way he squeezed out Perez, potentially, and there was some debate around that. But it was some good racing because he had to hold up Bottas as well and try his hardest to hang on to the top cars. In the end, obviously, the McLaren just wasn't that quick enough, but it meant the first part of the race was really juicy, watching him trying to hold people up. And then also at the same time, you had a lot of carnage. I remember at turn, was it 2 or 3? Because I think turn 2 is the kink, isn't it, or whatever. But just at the end of that first main straight, you know, off after turn 1, bit of carnage at the start, bit of jeopardy for a few different drivers, and then the rest of it was kind of just playing out. You were seeing Hamilton push hard, but he just didn't have much to answer. We obviously saw some really great driving from Leclerc, because actually I remember I just watched back the highlights. He dropped down, he was P18 from the start of the race, and then had to make his way back up the order. So the fact that he made his way back up the order, he had a great race. That was some entertainment in the midfield. So that's what puts it in decent, I feel, compared to the meh category, and brings it back up kind of in level with Portugal and Spain, I feel. And the second Austrian Grand Prix, and I actually just watched back the highlights. I got it wrong there. This was the race where Norris had the penalty squeeze for Perez, which was rather annoying, but he still ended up on the podium with Verstappen in first place, Bottas in second, Norris in third. Again, we saw Lando with a really great qualifying on the front row, and again, he was scrapping with the top cars, Red Bull and Merc, which made the start exciting. You had Merc a little bit further back as well. And then I can't fully clock and remember what actually happened to Hamilton in that race. I think it was damage, wasn't it? Damage to the floor over the bumps, it looks like, in the replays. I think that's what that was about. We actually had a massive squeeze-off moment for Leclerc with the Red Bull, but Lewis lost pace in that race, and Lando actually went and overtook him and actually raced him for position, actually got that overtake, legit done on circuit, rather than anything else like that. So I think that is another decent race. You know, it was a bit better than the first Austrian Grand Prix, but also at the same time, would I say it's a great watch? I think they're pretty equalized. I think we had a very similar copycat race almost with that second one, because we had the same man in the McLaren up there. You still had Red Bull looking the strongest. Verstappen walked both Grand Prix. It was just a bit of jeopardy in the second race for Hamilton that you can argue made it more exciting because of that podium. But really, in reality, the racing itself, entertainment value, was probably about the same, I would say. So I think they're both equalized as decent races. For the result alone, you can maybe say great watch. But like I said, I'm not basing this off result. I'm basing it off how I enjoyed watching the race. And I remember kind of just thinking, cool, that was a nice race, but it was kind of just the same as the one we had last time, just a little bit of difference in the result. Great Britain. Now this one, obviously a bit controversial. I mean, controversial right now because people keep referencing back to it in relation to arguing about the ending of the championship. I'm going to have to put it in the biblical category because of what happened in that race. Obviously, no one likes seeing a huge jump, but it was massively shocking, and, you know, obviously Verstappen walked away all fine, so it's all calm, but it was obviously a flashpoint in the season. It's going to be, you know, you're going to see pictures and videos of it in terms of, you know, remembering back to this season, the different hallmarks and the flashpoints there, and then the fact you had actually great drives from Leclerc managing to keep that Ferrari out in front for that long, but then eventually Hamilton doing this mega mega drive to come all the way back through to eventually win the whole damn thing just made it, yeah, biblical. Did make it biblical. Leclerc, though, I do remember distinctly being so impressed by Leclerc's drive that race, because I thought Hamilton would have actually caught him up quicker because of the pace of Merc and Red Bull relative to the other team. So Leclerc did a fantastic job of being in front for so long. But the biggest, obviously, flashpoint would just be that lap 1 incident. I think that alone just made it biblical because of what it meant for the championship, what it just meant for, things hotting up. I think that was the first time ever in the season that we're like, okay, this now is going to get even tastier. You're seeing maybe the two fans on, social media getting a little bit more nasty and toxic in a kind of bad way, really. But, it was kind of the start of, the real big tooth and nail rivalry, I think, between these two this season. We go to the Hungarian Grand Prix. Now, just for the start alone, biblical. Bottas playing Wii bowling at the start and inadvertently taking out, what was it? Hitting Perez, hitting Verstappen, then what was it? Lance Stroll span and hit Leclerc. I'm trying to remember everything happened in that first lap. All kicked off there. And then obviously Hamilton was also, in the mix of that, and with the whole safety car thing. And then we had that great iconic moment of him lining up alone on the grid because Merc didn't pit him, and that was his kind of part of being caught up in that with the rain as well, in terms of, what they were going to do, basically. Merc thinking, oh, we'll stick out. Everyone else came in, and then you had Ocon. It was Vettel on the podium, but he was then disqualified for the fuel error. But it was awesome to see Vettel fighting at the front, putting pressure on Ocon. That was in itself making it one of the best races in the season, just to see that kind of battle again. Bit of nostalgia from Vettel being up there. And then, of course, you had a new winner, Esteban Ocon, winning a Grand Prix. Absolutely fantastic drive for him in the Alpine. And Sainz on the podium as well there in it as well. Hamilton came through for second place. That was a very strong race for him, and one that he massively, it was massive in terms of 2 flashpoints of Britain and Hungary for him to come back into the championship after Verstappen had got an advantage. But just the race itself was really just a stonking one. I remember my jaw was not off the floor until the very end. Then we come to the Belgium Grand Prix. Grand Prix is a loose term for this race. Now, I didn't even watch this race because I was at a festival. So I actually chose really wisely, good life decisions from your boy, because those of you who did watch it saw nothing. So if I was to have watched it live, I probably would have fallen asleep. I wasn't asleep, I was at a festival, which wasn't watching the race, but probably a good thing. So I'm going to put it in the I fell asleep category. This proves, by the way, I'm doing this by the race itself, not the result, because, yeah, Russell, amazing for him to get a podium in a Williams. Amazing qualifying. Unreal qualifying. We're not basing off qualifying. We're basing it off the race. And the race, well, there wasn't a race. So we're going to put it in fall asleep. Netherlands, the Dutch GP. This was another just really meh. Well, I don't even know where it is. There we go. Verstappen won it at his home GP. I'm going to put it in fall asleep right now. Let me watch back the highlights right now, because I actually don't remember a lot of what happened there, because I believe I was out filming with Quadrant for a bit of the Grand Prix whilst it was going on. I'm going to put it in meh. There was some racing. I actually forgot about the Lando Perez incident where they came together a little bit, and then obviously you actually had Max having to overtake Merc on track because of, again, aggressive strategies from Red Bull. Ricciardo was actually looking a bit better around Zandvoort as well, but McLaren's car wasn't that great, so it was a bit of a weird one. Yeah, so it wasn't fall asleep, but it was meh. It was like a nailed on Verstappen victory. You could just see it coming that he was just going to dominate that one. There was no way he was going to and Red Bull wouldn't let him win his home GP this season, especially because it was the first time they're doing it. They were meant to do it last year, but because of, the pandemic, they had to delay it to this year. But so it was a meh one. I remember being like, I'm glad, I don't mind that I missed about half the Grand Prix doing Quadrant recording, because it really just wasn't that great. The Italian Grand Prix, of course, biblical, of course, because we had once again Hamilton, Verstappen coming together, but away from that, then great driving from the McLarens. Ricciardo wins in Formula 1 again, a 1-2 for McLaren. Fun fact, the only team to get a 1-2 this season, which is mad to me. I can't believe they're the only team to get a 1-2. That is actually ridiculous. And then Bottas got third place, but that was just a mental one. This one, ironically, I missed the crash live because, again, I was at a festival in the summer, so I missed that part, but I was able to watch the ending where they were controlling the race, and you maybe had Lando trying his best to catch up to Ricciardo, but just couldn't do it, and Ricciardo was able to control his lead and win the Grand Prix. Biblical race, big one for the championship in terms of another flashpoint, and then obviously a good feel for all those McLaren fans out there. Russia, ironically, Russia usually a stinker of a race. Usually Russia is firmly in the I fell asleep category. But I am actually going to say it was a great watch. And I'm saying this as a man, obviously, who wanted to see Lando get his first win. It was heart-wrenching for me and my fellow quadrant members to watch that. But as a, neutral fan of the sport, it was a very entertaining race. You had some really great battling going on, some interesting differing strategies, and of course the jeopardy of the rain coming in just made things so spicy and a bit like, oh, who's going to call this right in terms of, people sticking out. The chaos of, Leclerc spinning, Lando obviously going off, everyone having a few issues, and the rain started to pour down even harder. And then obviously you had this at the start, Sainz looked really good until his tyres went off. So that was also really intriguing at the start of the race, seeing him and Lando do really well and actually, be a bit of a spanner in the works for everyone. So I think Russia, very surprisingly, was a great watch this year, apart from obviously for me personally and other people who maybe wanted to see Lando win the race. Heart-wrenching at the end, but as a neutral, you got to say it was a great watch. Turkish GP, great watch. This one was helped by the rain. If this was a dry race, I'm still adamant this would have been a pretty meh Grand Prix. But I think with the rain again helping at Turkey, it turned into a great watch. Obviously, we had the jeopardy of Hamilton being at the back of the grid with the engine penalty. Bottas actually drove very well. Redemption. Bottas, made up for his mistakes last season around Turkey, and it was good to see him kind of actually do that well. And we had some great racing with Hamilton v Perez, that really, really spicy fight, and that kind of, maybe gave a little bit of a hallmark of what Perez was going to do to Hamilton later on at Abu Dhabi in terms of, that was them two fighting really, really hard in that kind of way. And then also you had just others also around them fighting, Claire at one point looking really good, Gasly as well, right up there. I think it was a great watch, and obviously the fact it was wet helped out in the end, because we had the exact same situation as last season where there was that kind of, slick intermediate thing, or, do you need fresh inters or do you need the dries or whatever. So again, Turkey delivered with that kind of sense of kind of just chaos involved with it. The US GP now, I am actually in a different mind to a lot of people. I think a lot of people thought this was a great watch. There just wasn't much happening, really. I did backseat for it, and I remember having to waffle a lot because nothing was happening on track. It was, don't get me wrong, a fantastic drive by Verstappen in Mercedes' backyard in terms of Mercedes' track. Verstappen did beautifully to protect his tyres, and Hamilton just didn't have anything to answer for it in terms of pushing hard, but Verstappen drove so maturely to keep his tyres in check. So it was a fantastic drive from Verstappen. It was exciting to see, the Merc track, being overturned by Verstappen and Red Bull, but it wasn't actually that great of an entertainment race. I'm going to watch back the highlights now. We did actually have a few decent fighting. Obviously, Alonso and Raikkonen was spicy. There was actually Sainz and Ricciardo. I forgot about that. And one can argue that, in the same way that France was a good strategic drive in terms of coming back with Red Bull coming back, and equally again, with Spain, what Hamilton did to overtake Verstappen, one could argue it's just the reverse. Verstappen did a brilliant strategic drive to stay ahead with his tyre management. So if you argue that from a F1 fan point of view, I think you can kind of see the merit of Verstappen's drive. There also just wasn't that much action though, so I don't think you can call it a great watch, like some people were saying. I don't know how the hell you could call it a great race. It wasn't a great race. It was just decent. It was a surprising one in terms of for us, because we all thought Merc were going to win that one easy. So it was actually surprising, which made it decent, I guess you could say, because the next one, Mexico, that ended up just being a little bit of a snooze fest. Nothing really changed between the top three. Obviously, Verstappen got the early lead. That was exciting. That one was thrilling to see him do a bonkers overtake. Beautiful stuff. Then fell flat. Brazil, oh my word. What a race weekend. Got to be in biblical. And I'm going to include the sprint race in that. Technically, with Britain, that had a sprint race. Italy had a sprint race. both of them end up being biblical weekends, but that was in spite of the sprint race, because the sprint race around Silverstone was a bit of a dud, Italy as well, but Brazil, the sprint race was actually really good because of watching Hamilton come through from his disqualification in qualifying, and then you had the race where Verstappen tried his hardest, the very robust defensive driving from him, but eventually Merck had a bit too much speed in the car, especially in the engine department, and Lewis was able to come back through and win that Grand Prix. That was a spicy one. There was also plenty of good battling as well in the midfield as well. We then move into the final 3 races of the season. Qatar, I am going to say it was a decent Grand Prix. I think it was decent because of some of the kind of just incidents that happened in the race and the start as well. Obviously, Alonso and Gasly were very high. That was very interesting to watch. Verstappen had to really, be very measured with his move on the opening lap to get through. But in the end, Hamilton had the race under control. The rest of it, the racing, there was some good racing between, I think, was it Perez squeezing out and fighting Ocon and fighting very hard, trying to hold him up for the sake of Alonso. In the end, the virtual safety car, helped out Alonso get a podium, so the result itself was pretty crazy. It was also a bit chaotic with the punches for Bottas, and then obviously Lando had a slow puncher, which was sad at the time. So I think it was a decent race. There was a bit of, nice action in there. Overall, maybe not the most sensational wheel-to-wheel racing right at the forefront, but it was a decent Grand Prix in terms of a few different storylines happening. You could argue it could go into Mare, though, very easily as well, but I think there was at least a bit more entertainment value in Qatar than there was, let's say, with Netherlands, Monaco, or Mexico. Saudi Arabia and then Abu Dhabi is left. Now, in terms of relative to these races we've got, I think Saudi Arabia, it was bonkers. It was a very entertaining race. In terms of actual sporting credentials for the FIA, it was a bit iffy, and it was the beginning of a conversation that I think now everyone's having about this season. FIA have been a bit weird. Michael Massey has been a bit weird, but it was a very thoroughly, biblically entertaining Grand Prix. I remember literally jumping up and down at the point where Hamilton hit the back of Verstappen and all that jazz. The fighting, the restart, when Ocon was in the lead, and that 3-wide pincer, beautiful dive bomb by Verstappen, by the way, down the inside. That kind of stuff was so entertaining. A little bit soured by, obviously, the usual antics of, this hard racing and pushing people off circuit and whatnot. And then you just had the jeopardy and the controversy of that, letting him back through, hitting the back of him, but then the end, Hamilton just waltzed away and actually had so much pace, ironically, with a broken front wing. So I'm going to say biblical, because also then it set up a finale that was level on points. So it was biblical, maybe for all the wrong reasons, some would argue. I think a lot of people, I think I saw a lot of that on Twitter, that it was a thoroughly entertaining race, maybe for the wrong kind of reasons, in terms of it was an entertaining spectacle, in terms of an actual motor race, a bit questionable, but it was biblical nonetheless to watch. And then we come to the final race of the season. Now, Abu Dhabi, for a lot of that race, you've got to admit, actually, was a very slow burner. Hamilton had that nailed on for most of the race once he had got past that whole stage of Perez holding him up. That first bit was a great watch, spicy as ever. Hamilton overtaking off the 5 red lights, then you had Verstappen making the dive bomb, Perez holding him up. That was so juicy. Then it really mellowed out quite a bit. It kind of almost became a classic race at Abu Dhabi, where it was kind of like, it's hard to overtake, and then Merkley had a lot of pace over Red Bull that race. Hamilton had a lot of pace over Verstappen that race, so it kind of, floated from great watch to just decent, and then at the end, for obvious reasons, I would just say, as a way to end a finale, end the season, you've just got to put that race in biblical because of the context of the entertainment value of that, basically. I'm not saying my opinion on it quite yet, because I'm going to do that in a different video, and I'm not saying it's biblical because one man won it and one man lost it, or vice versa. I'm just saying, as a man who especially watched it in person as well, as a neutral fan, it was just pretty bonkers to see what the hell we saw in front of our eyes. And also, as I said and argued at the start, it was a great watch, then went flat out, then the end became biblical because of that craziness. And as you can see, compared to other Formula 1 seasons, you can see why this is going to go down as one of maybe the best seasons we've ever had in Formula 1, and it is going to go down in history because there were so many biblical races, and there were just a decent chunk of great and decent races to fill in the blocks. Like, usually you have an ebb and flow of mad race, dud race, mad race, dud race in F1, and it makes you appreciate the great races. But this season, we got spoiled. There were so many back-to-back or, very close to each other, insane races, or just great watch races, which were highly entertaining. Not necessarily something chaotic happened, just a great race to watch. So yeah, F1 2021 is going to be an iconic season, and no more so because of the finale as well, but I will get into that into a different video, guys. But if you did enjoy this video, then hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed looking back and reminiscing a little bit about the season we just had in this video. If you did, let me know, and if you're new around here, do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.